back to the second episode of the STEM Expo 2021.
In this episode, we have an interview of Kaylee Walker, a bioengineer. Kaylee, would you mind telling us about yourself?
No problem. I currently am working for a pharmaceutical company in Marina del Rey called Armada that's working on something called bacteriophage therapies to combat bacterial infections. But my background before this was in yeast fermentations at a different company up in the Bay Area. And then in college, I studied actually a whole lot of stuff, but by the time I finally graduated, I had a degree in Biomolecular Engineering with a minor in bioinformatics, which is like the computer side of what do you do with all the data you make for all your bioengineering stuff. Before that, and I guess my whole life, I've always been kind of a science nerd. I've always been really into like naturalist stuff, nature, animals, plants, all that kind of stuff. And I still try to kind of keep up that side of my interest in science by just enjoying like reading books about kind of sciencey subjects and going on nature walks and stuff like that.
That's great. To add on to what you just said, how you were kind of a science nerd your whole life. Did you want to become a bioengineer when you were a kid? If you didn't, what job did you want to have?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that I didn't really know what bioengineer was before like I was about 20 years old. So before then, I was a little more focused on maybe being like sort of just a researcher in maybe a medical laboratory or something like that, or doing field biology and like going out to like interesting places and gathering specimens and making observations and kind of spending a lot of time outside. The reason why I kind of changed into doing bioengineering was both because there's a lot of really great jobs in really cool places to live, which is kind of a big thing, you know, once you're trying to pay bills and stuff, but also because it's just really fascinating. And like I said, like I can do bioengineering as my job and then still enjoy like going and looking at bugs and plants and stuff in my spare time. So it's kind of a great mix.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so I remember a while back you told me that you like helped create biofuel and stuff, right? So
yeah, that was in college. That was good.
And so how did you create biofuel, and how important do you think that biofuel is?
That's another really good question. Biofuel can be created with a pretty simple process depending on the kind that you want to get. So actually at a lot of gas stations right now, you can get a mix of biofuel and regular gasoline for your car. And the type of biofuel that usually is called ethanol. And ethanol is actually the same stuff that's in like alcohol to drink. Like there's many different types of alcohol, but the only one humans can safely drink is the stuff that's in beer and wine and stuff like that. So that works as a biofuel, but it's not like the best one. There's other types of gases and liquids that work better and like make your car go further on less fuel and all that kind of efficiency stuff. So when I was working on that, we were trying to make a specific kind using a bacteria to like, instead of eating bacteria food and making bacteria waste, we were like, oh, if we feed it bacteria food, maybe we can engineer this bacteria to excrete this specific biofuel instead. But the ethanol that I mentioned that's in like gasoline mixtures right now, that's even made just by yeast, the same organism that makes the beer and makes the wine and stuff like that. So that's really cool. You can kind of just get like a natural biofuel. The importance of biofuel, I think, is really interesting. Sometimes, depending on the type, again, you would have to change the type of engine that can run on it, or change the way that you fill your car with it or something. So those are kind of problems of infrastructure that have to change to catch up with the science that's creating like alternatives to gasoline. It'd be so great to have alternatives to gasoline and fossil fuel if we can just have everybody's cars be able to use that fuel, have everybody's gas station be able to, you know, sell us that fuel. So these are kind of all the things that tie into how to get that to work for us.
Well, that's great. I didn't know biofuel works as that.
It's like kind of intricate. I always thought, oh, biofuel, good, you can use it. People are like, oh, no, no. You have to have a different type of engine sometimes. I don't know.
That's interesting. Um, are you for most of the time as your job, are you an indie bioengineer or do you work in a group? If so, how do you ensure you are able to work successfully in a team?
Ooh, yeah. I work in a team of right now mostly 4 people, then sometimes 5. And actually, that's where a weird skill that I kind of have developed for myself over the years of working so far has come out, which is how to communicate with your team to make sure that the work that needs to get done is getting done. Um, it is tricky sometimes. Everybody has a different work style, everybody has a different work pace, and we all have to like make sure that we're not allowing mistakes to happen in our experiment setups, not like dropping the ball and forgetting to do something. Like sometimes I have to, start a process the night before and then come back the next day and really do the work. And if I forget to start that process, there's no work. So you have to make sure that everybody's crystal clear on who's doing what. And then another huge important part is it takes a little while for, like, we have our experiment, but it takes a while for the data from the experiment to come back to us. And that's because we have all these different tests and we ask different teams in my company to perform the tests on samples that we hand to them. So having a place for that data to live, just like in a file or something, it sounds so simple, but it's really important to make sure that everybody's like doing their part, and then that the final results of the experiment are like summed up well and are available for people to like look at and figure out what it means. So those are like the big things that you start to learn just with any teamwork at all. You guys probably know exactly about that.
Yeah, our school's teaching us about that, like to work in that like a team.
That's good.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't always work out.
No, yeah.
No, we lose out on a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, we end up even having to like call each other on the weekends sometimes, or text each other or something after hours and be like, hey, where'd you put that thing? Oh my God, I can't find it. Like stuff like that, the normal stuff. But yeah, that's a big challenge.
Yeah, well, I think that could definitely help our school or classes with teamwork and communication.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Especially that you can start really not small but early, like you can start at an early age.
Yeah, that is good. Start you guys young. Yeah, and it's always like if you have a question, you just always have to ask, like never assume. And then as you're starting an experiment of any kind, try to start thinking about where your data for it is going to live, like from the get-go. How do I want my data to look? Where does it go? What do I want to know? Like, what am I trying to figure out here? Yeah.
Okay, so our next question comes from Samantha Gorman, and her question is, what is your favorite part about your job? What is your least favorite part?
Ooh. My favorite part is still when things don't go as you thought they were supposed to go. That can be so interesting and also like frustrating. But when something very strange happens, like in an experiment, like one time our bacteria just all decided to change color and it all turned green. And we had this giant like vat of green liquid and it was super disgusting. And we're like, why is this happening? What is going on? And it's really annoying because you think you did something wrong. But at the end point, you realize like, oh, I just learned something about this process I thought I knew all about, and something changed. And so the bacteria turned green. Like, who knows how that happened? It happened. Yeah, I think when you kind of do get a new discovery, I guess that's kind of what I'm talking about. But they never come to you in like a flash of brilliance. They always come to you as like, oh my God, what is this problem? How do I fix it? My least favorite part is when people don't clean up after themselves in the lab. Super annoying. I don't like cleaning up after other people. And I do it a lot because some people are so busy. They're like, I don't have time to do my lab dishes. Can't do your lab dishes.
Yeah, that's just life in general. Like that even though that's like one job or one thing, it's with everything there's just a different like form of it, especially in class, like with some kids not getting their work done on
Or
time.
people just don't want to collaborate.
And teachers
and do
have
work.
and teachers have to remind them. It's kind of a pain, especially during online, because they have to email them. It takes a little.
Oh yeah, you can't even just like talk to somebody like face to face right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dang, that's hard. Yeah, I'm lucky. I get to work in person right now, and we're safe at my job. We wear masks and we keep social distancing.
That's great.
It's a lot easier to work in person sometimes. Working online can be a big challenge. Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of a broad question, not really similar to your job, but I was searching on the internet, and I just found this on Google, that NASA hires bioengineers. Is this true? And if so, you said you were working in an organization. Is the organization you're working in similar to NASA, what they're doing, or have you ever worked in an organization similar to NASA, or have you ever worked in NASA?
Yeah, I've never worked for NASA. My coworker actually did though, and he got a degree in chemistry, which maybe made him a little more hireable for them. But if they say they're hiring bioengineers, I believe it. There's a lot of different experiments I think NASA wants to carry out, not just about how to get into space and get back safely, but what happens to life while it's up there, and what happens to how can we make people safer when they are in space, doing important discoveries and stuff. How do we feed
Life
them
on Mars too,
there?
probably.
Right, and the Mars, the Perseverance rover just landed too. Maybe they're
could that help you with your the discoveries on the different life?
Not yet, but I assume it eventually will, because this is all kinds of stuff where you think, oh, this is discoveries they're just making out of curiosity. Like, why are we going to Mars? Why are we looking for stuff on Mars? But it's all, any little discovery can turn into something really incredible, whether it's for human health or whether it's for engineering or something like that. So yeah, I can see why they would want a bioengineer, especially if they're using if they're wanting to test samples from Mars when they bring them back. I hope they bring them back to Earth, to test and see, maybe a bioengineer can find clues whether or not there was life on Mars or not. So maybe that'd be my first guess as to what they're doing with bioengineers at NASA.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, and let me know. I can put you in touch with my coworker who used to work for NASA as well, if you just remind me.
That'd be great. Yeah,
that'd be really cool.
Let the viewers know.
Yeah. I don't know what his role was there. Maybe he was a janitor. Maybe he was, the astronaut. I have no idea.
Okay, so our next question is, so you told me that you were working on a virus that could help kill bad bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
So how is this virus going to work, and what role do you have in working on the project?
Yeah. Then there are, just like humans catch viruses that hurt our cells, bacteria also naturally have, basically like their predators are viruses that only attack bacteria. They're really specific viruses that only attack a really specific bacteria. And so instead of using a chemical antibiotic, I don't know if either of you have ever had an infection that you had to take an antibiotic for. That's usually some kind of a drug, right? That's in a pill and you take it. The viruses that we're discovering and working on are just kind of all around us all the time. Wherever there's bacteria, there are the predators of bacteria, the viruses of bacteria. So we just went and got a sewer sample or something horribly disgusting and purified out whatever viruses were there and checked these viruses to see if they could kill the bacteria that infect humans. The application of that might be really important right now, specifically because bacteria can evolve to become resistant to the regular antibiotics that we take over time. And that's just natural evolution that happens. It's not like the bacteria are trying to be evil or anything. That's how life works on the planet, right? Whatever survives a poison is going to then multiply, and then suddenly you have more of the survivors that live and are resistant to the poison. So we're hopefully going to be able to use these viruses to take care of people who are sick with infections that can't be cured with the regular antibiotics. And what I do to work on that research is a different person at my job like discovers the little strain of virus that works against the bacteria we're trying to kill. And then they hand it off to me, and I grow like a giant gallon's worth of bacteria and virus. And then I try to purify only the virus out of that disgusting broth of bacteria and junk and stuff, so that we can test how well large quantities of this virus work. Because one virus wouldn't work as a drug in a person. If I swallowed one virus, it wouldn't take care of this disease, that if I had a disease that I needed to take this for. It would have to be like a treatment therapy, like maybe an intravenous, like IV drug, where you go to the doctor and they hook you up to a bag of virus liquid and let that go into your blood veins and let it cure you of your blood infection or something. So I have to make big quantities of it so that we can test it. And then the big point for making any kind of drug is making sure that it's safe and it's effective. If it's not effective, if it doesn't work, there's no point in using it. If it's not safe, you can hurt people really bad, which we cannot have. So that's a big thing at my job, is safety and efficacy. And that's what you hear a lot for pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you think this could eventually, like, I don't know, kill cancer or something?
Not these viruses, but there's therapies that are trying to use other viruses that would only attack the cancer cells, to cure cancer, which would be so cool.
That's amazing.
It could just be,
Yeah, it really is amazing.
oh my god, yeah, can you imagine? Yeah.
The person who made that would be like filthy rich.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the funny thing about science, is it's like really important work, but there's also a lot of money in it. Like, there's a pretty good reason to want to get into making these life-saving therapies, and you get compensated, Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
So this question is kind of from Michael Sherman, but since my question was so similar to his, we just had it formed into one. So this is the question. For the viewers who want to be bioengineers, what does it take to become one?
At this point, I feel like college is typically the answer to that question. You go to a university and you get a degree in some kind of biotechnology or biotech related field. However, I do want to say that I have some incredible coworkers who got into science kind of in a different way. One of the people I've worked with really closely at my old job had a degree in fine arts. He was a photographer that used, like, not digital photography, but like the chemical bath type photography. And he knew so much about the chemistry of this stuff that he said, oh, I can get this job at like entry level at a science company, right? He worked his way up after 10 years, and after 10 years was creating experiments, designing incredible ways to test things, stuff like that. So I want to say, like, oh, you have to go to school and you have to get the degree. It definitely makes it easier. Like, this guy had to work for 10 years to get to the point where, like, maybe somebody who'd gone to college would get in a couple years. But he was able to, like, kind of do both. He was able to follow his passion of art and his passion for chemistry and science and do some really incredible work. So if there's an interest, if there's a will, there's a way. And, reaching out to people in the field and getting involved, like, if you enjoy science at any level, trying to talk to people who do those jobs, or trying to talk to people who, write like research papers and stuff, or work at universities, is a great way to do it. I do want to note too that a lot of researchers that do write papers and are doing science, like to publish their findings and stuff, love it when people reach out to them and ask them questions about their work, because they're so into their work. They love to talk about it. They want to share it. They want to tell people what's going on. So often, like, you can just find their email on like a university website and say, hey, I have some questions about your work. Oftentimes, if they have the time, they want to respond to that, because it's really fun to talk about your exciting research. People nerd out. It's good.
So people could start, like, because in our school it's grades 5 to senior. I forgot what that grade is, but people could start from any grade that I just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also like there's even volunteer work that you can do at basically any age, depending on what type of volunteer work it is. Like, I think at the point you're in high school, you can volunteer at a hospital, even if you're interested in human health. But you can also like go to, maybe not during COVID, but sometimes at science museums, they need people to help with like making presentations and stuff for tours, stuff like that. So that's a way to start too. If you have time and if COVID isn't restricting everything, then you can get involved at any age. People really like to sponsor those who want to learn, and so there's often like a lot of community around helping teach people, helping people try stuff out. You can shadow somebody, you can follow them around at their job for a day, bother them all day, ask a bunch of questions. Yeah, that's what I did when I was in high school too. We had to do a career day shadowing thing where we just followed somebody around, and I was able to follow around a field biologist who was taking samples of like water from the bay and like wetland mud and stuff like that. It was really cool.
Yeah, that seems really cool to just follow someone or something that you had a passion or interest for, and just see what they were doing the whole day.
Yeah, even if you hate it, that's good to know too. Oh, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least you know now.
Yeah. Another really cool thing I've discovered as an adult only, really, but that anybody any age can do is something called citizen science. Has this come up for you guys in STEM?
No.
Okay, yeah. A really cool example I saw was somebody wanted a bunch of data from all over the United States about what kind of like natural non-harmful bacteria live on our bodies. And so they said, hey, I'm going to send out this email list. If you want, I will send you a kit for you to take this like Q-tip and swab your belly button. Send me that swab, and I will be able to use that sample that you gave me for my data. So they did this, and it worked really well, and it was kind of a really cool example of citizen science. As people all over the country were like, oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, I'll help out with that. I'll give you some samples, some data to work with. And now there's this term called citizen science. Like, I did one where I sampled ants from my backyard. Like, I caught ants, put them in a tube, put them in the freezer to kill them, which was sad, but it's for science. And then sent these ants in the mail to the researcher who wanted to know what ants were living in my backyard. And they did this all over the country, and they made this huge map of what ants live where. It was really cool. Yeah.
Is this year or?
That was a couple years ago, but I think I can send you the lab email that asked for these things, because they had a bunch of different stuff. Like, another one was sampling the water that comes out of your shower. They wanted to see how clean it was, which was kind of gross, but yeah, all kinds of stuff. Another one was they wanted to know what kind of stuff was growing in sourdough bread starter. Do you guys know about like that weird sourdough bread stuff?
Yeah.
So they had people send samples of their sourdough starter from all over the country too. So it could be anything. Yeah. Yeah. Citizen science. I'll try to send that info as well. Yeah.
I was like, that can't be that much ants, but I looked at different types of ants. There's like so many.
It's pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, it is.
Don't they outnumber humans like?
Oh yeah, all the ants. Like,
yeah.
It's so weird. There's like 1 trillion ants, and like if you divided all the ants in the world with 7 billion people, there'd be like 1 trillion ants like with one person. It's crazy.
It's alarming.
Yeah.
I believe it too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
I believe Mark Grober did something like that too. A social experiment.
I heard something like all the ants in the world are heavier than all the people in the world. It's crazy.
Yeah, insects are really successful there. Yeah,
definitely. They survived all mass extinctions.
Yeah.
Do you actually? I have another question. Are there bioengineers that worked in the past, like that would get examples from fossils, or would there be any remnants left from animals that would be frozen?
That were bioengineered? I don't really know. I don't think so. There's kind of my example that would maybe be in the slightly yes category is a weird one, which is a lot of people in the science community consider agriculture to be a form of bioengineering. So that whole idea is sort of based on the concept that bioengineering is altering DNA of a living organism. The way that humans domesticated plants and animals was sort of like a really, really slow method of changing their DNA. Because what they did was, if you have 5 sheep and 2 of them are really, really tame and like people and make really, really thick wool, you're going to breed those 2 sheep together, right?
The artificial selection.
Yeah, the artificial selection, exactly. And then, those sheep, maybe their offspring will be tame and have really good wool, and they're going to continue that process over and over. But the idea is that does change the genetics. You're trying to remove from that gene pool sheep that are wild and crazy and want to, headbutt people too much or whatever the heck. So that's the idea that, yeah, we have really fast bioengineering now where we can splice DNA into cells and then grow that up into a wheat plant that makes wheat plus iron supplements and makes people healthier. But in the past, that was just done really, really slowly by interbreeding those plants together, waiting for them to grow, waiting to harvest the wheat, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be my one example is if there's fossils of domesticated plants and animals, then I would consider those slightly bioengineered.
This is the last question. What are some inventions made by bioengineers?
I have like a really famous example that was like one of the first ones taught to me when I learned about this stuff in college. So for people that have diabetes, they have to take the drug called insulin. Have you guys heard of that one? Yeah. And basically what insulin does is it helps your body absorb sugar into its useful form. Like you eat food and your body has to absorb that sugar properly for you to use it as energy. And the insulin is what helps that happen. Insulin for diabetics historically was really hard to come by. You had to take the pancreas organ from, I think, pigs and grind them up and do some weird extraction of some liquid. I don't know how they did that part actually. I'm assuming they squeezed it or something and got the liquid out and then purify that, and you have this kind of pig insulin that people would be able to take, and somehow it kind of worked against diabetes. But it's hard to get. It requires you to have pig pancreases laying around, which I guess we do from eating pigs generally, but kind of an icky prospect. Somebody decided this is ridiculous. It's time to use the tools of science to make a better solution than this. So they went and looked at the human gene for insulin. They went and found that human gene for insulin, I think in that huge human genome project, decoding of the human DNA. They found the gene for the insulin. They took that gene and inserted it into a bacteria. And then they grew big vats of that bacteria, kind of like what I do at work in what we call a fermentation. And then we're able to filter out all the bacteria and have not just insulin, but insulin that is technically from a human gene, not a pig gene. So it's more closely aligned to the natural insulin in the bodies of people who don't have diabetes and who make insulin, at the normal rate. So what they did was they made it cheaper, they made it better, and they made it less dependent on like factory farming of pigs. And so that's kind of like the shining example of what bioengineering can do, is you can take a gene from a human, stick it in a bacteria, and get this incredibly important, life-saving drug for people.
Especially that factory animals, sadly, are not even like real animals, or just modified animals. Like there's ideas of just animals being in farms for the rest of their lives, and like the pigs are so much different. It's like kind of almost a different, not a different species, but a whole different animal.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's not even natural, and there's been studies showing that the pig tastes better in a real farm than a factory farm. Just because it's easier doesn't mean it's, better. So it's good that people are doing factory farms, especially that people used to get insulin from factory pigs.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. We're like, maybe we can sidestep this issue, and there's way less ethical concerns over a bunch of bacteria. Like, we really don't feel bad killing a bunch of bacteria, do we? But yeah, hurting animals is tough, even though we do eat them all the time. It is kind of like a gnarly part of being a meat eater. Whereas bacteria, it's like, well, yeah, we can eat those. I don't care. Probably eat them every day in yogurt and kimchi and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here and doing the interview.
Yeah, no problem at all. And again, I'm going to try to get you information from my coworker who worked at NASA, and then that citizen science link. Yeah. But thanks so much for interviewing me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your
time.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.